Right, well, we're just going to get stuck straight into it. The channeling first.
Hi there, thanks.
G'day, how you doing?
Thank you for receiving us.
It's our pleasure.
So I know a little bit about how this goes.
Yep. You've been learning a bit about how it goes.
We watched yesterday, so...
Yeah. With Ivana.
Yeah. We've been doing some research as much as we can.
Since then? Yep.
But we still have some questions. So...
Well, perhaps if we could first know a bit about yourself. Yeah.
So I represent a group of... We would have called ourselves scientists and educators when we lived on Earth. My name is Coral. I'm a woman, but there are many men here with us as well, and women. But as I said, we all considered ourselves to be educators. I myself was a medical doctor, and there's a number of doctors and scientists in this group. The commonality between all of us is that none of us believe in God. We didn't believe in God on Earth. Some of us were raised in religion, but felt that there was overwhelming evidence for a lack of God in a Christian sense or in any other sense. And this belief guided our lives. We taught people there was no God. I myself performed abortions because I felt there is no God. We influenced many people in this belief. Students, some of us were professors and teachers in our professions. Some of us did experiments on people and animals in the belief that the most important thing was to preserve life on Earth and to not worry about anything else beyond that. Many of us believed that we were humanitarians or humanists, but now as we're finding ourselves in great deals of pain, we had not considered that this was because we didn't believe in God, and now we're forced to consider that and forced to re-examine our lives in this light. So before now, we haven't considered that it's the absence of a belief in God that has created this pain that we're in, but now we're forced to consider it. And
Do you understand why the pain exists in terms of the linkage between the pain and your life while you were living on Earth?
No. Well, no. Not really. We've heard you lecture about belief. So we were first brought last weekend to your talk then.
To the first talk in San Diego.
Yes. And there we heard you lecture about belief. We didn't think in particular this belief that we have about God was of such significance. As I said, we're just trying now to research the correlation between the pain we're in now and that belief.
Gotcha. So before you were brought last weekend, what was happening for you in your spirit state? So you're all conscious that you passed.
Yes.
And of course, for many of you would not have expected to continue living.
No.
So how did you explain the continuous living to yourself?
Well, there was so much of... it was clear that our self and our self-perception remained intact.
Yes.
After the death of the body.
Yep.
And so we understood that consciousness continues.
Yep.
And we understood that we still had a physical form.
So you can still see your physical body,
yes,
which is now a spirit body.
Yes.
But, and did you see your own bodies in the grave, or many of you had also had your bodies burnt, but some in graves?
Yeah, we understood pretty much.
As soon as you passed?
Most of us were conscious that death was impending.
Yeah.
The majority of us, not absolutely everyone here.
Yeah.
Some died suddenly.
Yeah.
But even those were able to extrapolate, if you like, from the experience that we were now in, that we were no longer of the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
We could observe the earth, we could visit the earth.
Yeah.
Many of us could see happenings after our death.
Yeah.
But we understood that consciousness continued. Some of us had varying ideas about what that meant. For myself, I felt very bound to a physical experience. Others took some time to understand that they were still in a body. They thought it was just a consciousness that was continuing. But because I've been in extreme physical pain since my passing, I couldn't deny that I was in a body.
Yeah, yeah.
And so some of us have experimented with what the significance of this consciousness continuing.
Yeah.
But largely we've all just similarly dedicated ourselves to trying to understand our new environment, our new surroundings, with this same sort of mindset as we've always had.
Yeah, gotcha. But obviously, because of the pain, you've been seeking for solutions to the pain.
Yeah.
As you would if you were a doctor on earth, I suppose, when you're looking after your patients.
Yes. And I haven't really been seeking it on the earth.
Yeah.
But my surroundings have been such that I haven't had, I've been, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, well, so let's look at, you mentioned quite a number of things, the different ones that you had been doing while you were on earth as physicians or educators or, obviously as professors and so forth. One of the things you mentioned was that there were experiments done on animals. Another thing you mentioned was that there was sort of a really strong focus on only dealing with any physical problems. Not you saw every problem as physical. Is that how you saw, or how did you see emotional problems?
A lot of us weren't very connected to emotions or other people really on earth.
Yeah.
So scientifically, does that answer your question?
More like an experiment as well, or
just that emotions were problems that could be fixed. We just needed to find the correct solution.
And did you feel those solutions were physical, or did some of you consider they were psychological?
I would say physical, societal.
Okay, yeah, cultural.
When I was a practicing doctor, we didn't have a lot of the, the ways that psychological difficulties are approached
today,
on Earth today.
Yeah.
But
what time frame were you on Earth?
But in the 50s, I was looking at retiring, so in the earlier part of the last century.
Yeah, gotcha.
I suppose with my patients, and I'm just trying to get consensus here with others, we largely viewed emotions as, we didn't really think about emotions, but if there was a difficulty someone was having, then there should be a solution that was practical, and it may involve a change in physical environment, a change in change in a situation or circumstance.
Yeah.
And usually that would solve the problem.
Yeah. Good eye. All right, so, and is there any questions before we proceed with the discussion about, is there anything specifically you want to ask questions about?
Well, I suppose the reason we became very concerned yesterday is that it seemed that you were saying that the lack of belief in God could have a large impact upon, well, more things than we had considered. And also there's this growing concern amongst the group about the influence that we have all had upon others through that belief and influenced others to have that belief.
Yeah.
And if indeed there is a great impact of having that belief, is it the belief that we have that has created? Before we heard you lecture, we didn't think that there was a connection between. We didn't really think there was a connection between our earth life and our current circumstances.
Right.
And then there's been a growing idea that perhaps this belief may have had an impact on our circumstances.
Yeah.
But there is a common question about action on earth and affecting our current circumstances versus belief on earth affecting our current circumstances. And if indeed both actions and belief have created the circumstances that we are in now, what is the solution?
Yeah.
And yes, perhaps that's the best.
Yeah, okay. So let's, if we try to examine this from a logical perspective in terms of where you're at now versus where you were on Earth, and then also we need to see the linkage between beliefs and actions on Earth and the current circumstances, don't we? If there is any link, we need to examine whether there is.
Well, there's the three components in our understanding.
Yep.
There's the current circumstance.
Oh, so I'll write these down. Yep. So there's current circumstance.
We're trying to sort of triangulate here. There's the circumstance, there's the beliefs, and then there's the actions on Earth. How are each of those things related to each other?
Yeah, good question. I suppose I'm conscious of the fact that you were all in a lot of pain, and so how we approach this discussion, I would, as you would probably like to do if you were a doctor, you probably want to alleviate the pain as much as possible before maybe investigating the reasons for it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So I can approach this conversation with you answering the questions that you have, but the problem is that's not going to necessarily alleviate the pain that you're in right now.
What will alleviate the pain?
Well, two things. Answering the question about whether there is a God or not is I feel a critical thing we can do quite quickly. And also then ask if God does exist, asking that God, why are we in the circumstances we're currently in? And this would be the fastest way to deal with the problem if God did exist.
I think the consensus here, I hear your point, but I think the consensus here is that the only way to establish if God does exist is to sort of have this discussion that I mentioned with you.
It's not the only way, though. From a logical perspective, you can see, yes, we can look at the effects of things and try to determine a cause for those effects. Or we can attempt another experiment, just like you would scientifically, just the experiment as to whether God exists or not. And if we can do a clear experiment with whether God exists or not, then a lot of the further discussion will be simplified through the process. If God does not exist, then let's go to the other questions you have and work out why you're in the situation. But if God does exist, then obviously the fastest thing to do is address that issue, and then what were the effects of not believing God exists on your current life. So I sort of feel like it's easier to do the second thing because it's going to have as much more power and in terms of and also more immediate effect. If God exists, there is a potentially it'll have an immediate effect on your circumstances.
And so we also see a delineation between fact and belief.
Yes.
So now you're talking about facts.
Well, I believe facts are beliefs. So there's two types of beliefs. There's false beliefs, which are not facts, and then there are true beliefs, which are facts. So I would call them the same thing. But here we're talking about spiritual matters rather than physical matters. So in other words, facts about the emotional makeup of humans, facts about the spiritual makeup of humans, versus facts about the physical makeup of humans. So on Earth, you were concerned about the physical makeup, weren't you? Primarily, and looking at everything, all the facts from a physical perspective. And what I'm suggesting is no, there's also facts about the emotional makeup, the sexual makeup, the spiritual makeup of humans, which incorporate far more facts than just looking at the physical.
So have we it seems we've misunderstood something about belief and fact. So is it that it's not actually the beliefs that have affected us being here?
Correct. It's the facts. And it's what you believe versus those facts. So in other words, the comparison of false beliefs or false things that are not true versus the things that are true. But on a spiritual level rather than a physical one. So in other words, concepts that you had. So an example of that is a concept of God. You had a concept of God which is there is no God. So that's a concept that you had. Other people have a concept of God that there is a God but it's a triune God, or there is a God but I am God, or there is a God but there's many gods. You know, there's all these different concepts. And all of those are beliefs, but which one is the factual one is the one I'm interested in. And what relationship is there between having a factual belief and the circumstances you're currently in?
That's clear.
Yeah. So if we can sort of establish a relationship between those things, then it might be very helpful in terms of progress, you see.
So is it correct in saying that you are saying that, so now you're focusing on God, which is the question that we had.
Yes.
But it seems that you're implying that the current pain we're experiencing would be alleviated if we change the belief now. So it's not about the belief we had on Earth.
Well, the belief you had on Earth created your current circumstances. And when I say it created it, the belief you had on Earth caused you to act in certain manners which were against factual laws that existed. So if you consider, say, the law of gravity, which is a physical law, if you act against the law of gravity and you jump off a building, for example, there's going to be a physical consequence. Well, in the same manner, if you act against a spiritual law or an emotional law, there are consequences to those as well. And so what we need to do is learn the facts of those laws.
I feel a bit distracted now because you mentioned the potential of getting out of pain. So I had accepted that pain was just a constant, and now that you've introduced that, now I feel it's.
Well, this is what I'd like to alleviate. You see, sort of like you can see and understand why, right? Because this is what was your goal on Earth, wasn't it? Just to help people alleviate their pain that they were experiencing. So naturally, if I'm a physician of any kind as well, that would be also my goal, wouldn't it? Yeah. So and obviously, when a person's in a lot of pain, it also makes it very difficult to think logically and feel clearly and things like that as well, because they're so focused just on the sensory pain rather than being able to apply or feel about spiritual concepts. And so
I felt that I had kind of gained energy enough to have this conversation, and I was helped by people here to do that. But I did feel that the question we came with was the most important one, but now I understand that perhaps it's not.
To my mind, the question is the belief in God that you have an accurate belief, a truthful belief. And then if we can determine whether that is a truthful belief or not, then what we can do is work from there and go, okay, now that we can see the consequences of a false belief, what were the results of that false belief and the actions you took on earth that caused you to act in the manner you did based upon having that false belief? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So what I'd like to do first is if we can go through this faster process, it'll be a faster process if we do it this way. And so if we can go through this faster process, then a lot of your questions about other matters are going to be quite able to be quickly resolved. They're not going to be necessarily able to be quickly felt through, but they'll able to be quickly resolved in terms of what is the truth, what isn't the truth, which is my main concern for you. So what I'm thinking we'll do first is I want to talk about if God does exist. So we just from now on there will just be 2 experiments I want to conduct regarding whether God exists or not. And if you can engage these experiments sincerely, with your emotions, with your feelings, then we'll be able to determine whether God does exist or doesn't exist quite quickly. And then once we can determine that, then we can also potentially ask God about the other questions. But you can you feel in amongst all of you, there is this underlying feeling of resistance about let's solve this problem first. Can you?
Yes.
You would rather solve a physical problem or even an emotional one than actually solve the question about whether God exists or not. But as I said to the group yesterday and also last week in San Diego, in the city, the belief does finish up motivating you and drive you into certain actions. And so if we can resolve this belief about God, whether it's true or not, then we'll be able to dissect that belief a bit down the track and go, okay, how has that affected where I am right now?
I think there's quite a lot of resistance in all of us now.
So let's try to do some of that.
Could you just answer the question?
Sure.
The first question,
yep.
I think, is really what?
Regarding? So
the relationship
between beliefs and the current circumstances.
And action.
And action. Yep. Well, firstly, the beliefs you held while you're on earth caused you to act in specific ways, and those specific ways have now caused you to be in your current circumstances. So there is a direct correlation between the pain and suffering you're now experiencing and the actions you took while on earth, and then what caused you to take those actions on earth, which were your beliefs while you were on earth.
Okay. And are you saying that the belief about God has been the most
impactful?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It caused you on earth to do a number of things you might not otherwise have chosen to do.
Yes, that's what we can see.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
we've begun to examine the actions we took on earth based on that belief, and
correct.
they are a multitude.
Yeah. So an example, you mentioned that you've committed, you've had abortion, you've performed abortions.
Myself, yes.
Yes. If you if you believed in a God and you believed in the truth about the human soul, for example, then you might not have committed those abortions. But those abortions are partially part of the reason why you're in pain.
Okay.
Does that
all right.
make sense?
Yep.
So I'm just giving you an example of sort of how it works. But it's better if we can sort of ask direct questions, or sort of direct the first question being about God, because once we do that and we sort out that question, then we can go from there and start sorting out, okay, what beliefs then caused me to act in the way that I did act, and what are the consequences of taking those actions.
Okay.
Yep. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the operation of what I call the conscience. And you've heard of the idea of conscience before in your life on earth, right? There are many philosophies on earth about what the conscience is. But basically, it gives you the ability to find out from God whether there is a God. So the way it's engaged is emotionally you have to have a desire to know the answer as to whether there is a God or not. And then we can ask specific questions about the nature of that God if God does exist.
Sorry, it's just a lot more happening. Do you mind if we stop that? Yeah. It's quite hard for them to
A lot of you are fidgeting and whatever.
Yeah, and it's already difficult for them to sort of be...
I'm presenting to them very complex things for them, and they need some calm and peace.
And yeah.
Okay, so if you can, for a moment, just ask, and this needs to be, do you want to know the answer? So to receive answers, if God does exist, to receive answers from God, you've got to want to know the answer. If you don't want to know the answer, then no answer can come. So let's firstly work through any emotion you might have about wanting to know the answer. So why, if God did exist, why would you want to know that God did exist? Can we address that first?
Yeah, that's what it feels like we're all confronting now, because if God does exist, then
how do you feel about that if it's true? So
quite a lot of trepidation, all of us.
Why is that? Let's deal with some of this. It's fear, isn't it, that you're experiencing when you contemplate the possibility. So why is the fear? What would you be afraid of if God did exist?
Just all the decisions that we make based on the idea that God didn't exist, we would have to re-examine every one of them and ask what the impact was of those things.
Yeah.
And we can't imagine, we can't know what those implications have been.
Yeah. But if God does exist, you were able to communicate with God, then you'd be able to ask God what the implications actually are. So from a logical perspective, if God doesn't exist, then you won't know what the implications are. If God does exist, then you can ask God what the implications are. So either way, it's worth finding out one way or the other, isn't it?
Certainly.
Yeah. What other fears do you have? So there's a fear of
there's many
actions taken.
There's many religious
concepts,
beliefs that are now surfacing amongst us. Are they correct? Because we had felt that there was enough evidence to say that they weren't.
They all weren't. Yes. But let's look at that one. For the most part, a lot of the religious concepts on earth about God are false. So that's first, and of course it would make sense in a way that they're false, because most of the constructs that have been created on earth about God have been people's idea of what God is rather than what God actually is. So it's just been people coming up with ideas. And as you know, people's ideas are often very illogical and don't make any sense and so forth. So if you examine a lot of religious constructs that are on earth, a lot of them make no logical sense whatsoever, and so therefore can't be true, because if God exists, he would be a scientist, and then there would be a logical flow to all of the beliefs surrounding God, right? So in the end, there's a lot of beliefs that exist on earth about God that we can almost dismiss out of hand. It's sort of better to start with a clean slate about our belief about God.
Well, and that's the other feeling, that there is this sort of a level of indignation as to the idea that if God does exist, and if our belief that God didn't exist is the cause of all of our pain now, how were we supposed to know that God existed? There was no good representation of God that we could.
But I think we can resolve that after we solve the problem, the initial question. I don't agree that there is no clear representation of God on earth, but again, if we're in a state where we don't want to believe it, and we see religions and the actions of religions on earth, it's obvious that religions are not very nice to people on earth, generally speaking, and we start attributing the nature of God to those religions, then of course, naturally, we're going to start feeling that maybe God's what the religions are teaching, and if that God did exist, then I'd put to you that God actually can't exist at all, given the fact that all these people have different ideas of what God is.
Yes. Not
all of them can be right.
That's what.
So what we've got to do is just work out what is right rather than worrying about what is wrong.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And we can often do that from a place where we don't have a formulated belief in God, rather than coming from a place where we quite firmly believe in a certain structure or something about God. So what I'm saying is a lot of the religious ideas that you're worried about are not true anyway. So it's easier for us to just start from a clean slate than try to discount all of those religious ideas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, if God does exist, logically, God knows everything going on. If God is a creator of everything, which is what people claim, then it would make sense that God knows everything that's going on, including everything that's going on with you. Wouldn't that be true, logically?
Yes.
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 It also, the fact that certain emotions exist means that there's potential that God has those emotions to a greater degree. So an example of that is in humans there is love, an emotion of love. Then it would make sense that God has an emotion. If God does exist, God would have to have the quality of love within herself in order to create a human that has the quality of love. God would be able to define what love is. If God was the creator, God would have to create what God knows. God must already know it in order to create it. So if there is such a thing as laws, for example, then God must know all of them. If there's such a thing as emotions, such as love or any other emotion, then God must know all of them too.
Yes.
Does that make sense? God must know how they work and the mathematics and science behind those things. God must know those things. If God exists at all, God would have to know those things. So that would also mean then that God would have to know how to communicate with you.
Yes.
But logically, it would make sense, wouldn't it? If God created all things, then logically God would also then have to know how to communicate with you directly if God wanted to. And what I'm suggesting is we do an experiment to see if that's possible. Now most of us think with our mind that if we talk to God with our mind, we'll get a response in our mind. But already in your spirit life that you see these thought packets coming from other people. Have you noticed them? Yeah. So even when you're communicating with each other, quite often there's thought packets, isn't there? When they're some distance away from you, the thought packet comes to you, you're able to read the packet basically through your mind, and you're able to determine from that packet of information whether you want to meet up with a person and so forth. So you can see from that example that packets of thoughts are being passed from mind to mind, not just verbal words.
Yeah.
Yes? So you can see these thoughts are things. Let's then let's go one step further than that. If thoughts are things, then what if emotions are things and beliefs are things?
Okay.
It would make sense that if thoughts are things that we can see passing between one person and another, then it would also make sense that perhaps emotions are things we can see passing from one person to another. So an example of that is you would notice on earth when you've gone to try to help somebody as a spirit that sometimes you see colours coming out of people.
I personally
Haven't done that? Some of you might have. Now, if you look at the audience here today, the physical audience, forget the spirits who are around at the moment, just look at the physical audience. Can you see there's different colours of things coming out of each person? Yes? Now, can you see if I say something that upsets a person, so an example is I talked to John earlier, now look at what's coming out of John.
Yep, we see difference.
Can you see the difference? As soon as I mention John's name even.
It's not something that we pay a lot of attention to, but yes.
Yes.
We can see the difference.
You can see different colours coming out of him straight away, even just mentioning his name.
Yes.
He can feel himself being identified, he's worried about what it is, he can feel there's different colours of energy coming out of him. So obviously him just being identified has caused him to have a feeling that caused different colours to come out of him. So that tells you that feelings have packages, that are just not thought packages. They're expressed in a different way.
Okay.
Make sense?
It does.
Okay. So if we have thoughts and we have feelings, it would make sense that if God exists, God would have thoughts and feelings. Because God would have to know what a feeling is in order to create one in a human. Just like God would have to know what a thought is in order to create a thought in a human.
So does God create our thoughts and feelings? That doesn't seem right.
No, but God is able to communicate with you through thoughts and feelings. Just like you've seen, there's a lot of communication going on here in the room, and a lot of colours coming out of different people in the room, but none of them are saying anything yet. But they do have thoughts.
So you're saying God created the capacity for those things?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, okay.
And therefore God would have to understand them.
Yes.
It makes logical sense. If God exists, he would have to understand what he created.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so let's assume for a moment that, forget about thoughts for a moment, because you've never seen a thought packet that comes from an unidentified source, have you?
No.
No. So every time there's a thought packet coming, you know who sent it.
Yes.
The identity of the person who sent it.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but you've never seen one that says this is from God. No.
No.
Right? So that would tell you that God doesn't transmit thoughts. If God exists, God doesn't transmit thoughts. Because over the last 2 weeks, over the last 2 weeks, you've asked the question about whether God exists, and you haven't received any thoughts from God about it.
No.
Is what I'm illustrating.
No.
Yep. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is say what God doesn't do, firstly.
Okay.
So God, and if you examine your earth life, you can see a lot of the way you thought of God was you had thoughts, and you wanted God to present you with thoughts or proof through thoughts, and you didn't get any. And then you said to yourself, that means there is no God.
Yes.
Fundamentally.
Yes.
You felt there's no proof.
Well, we haven't been able to find evidence of
Correct,
God.
correct.
No.
But what if God communicates via feelings rather than thoughts? You haven't tried that yet, have you?
No.
Okay,
No.
so what I'd like to do is experiment with trying that.
Okay.
That makes sense? So in order to do this, we need to experiment with having a feeling towards God that I want to know whether you exist.
So, okay.
And it has to be a desire that you have in your feelings. It can't be just a thought that comes up. I want to know if you exist, that you don't care about one way or the other. It has to be something you care about in order to be a feeling. So it has to be a feeling that you feel like, I want to know, whether you exist, like a passionate, I want to know.
I'm not sure any of us have that. How do we get that?
That's right. It's going to be tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine for a moment that there are huge things in your future that knowing the truth about this matter will affect. So how do you feel about that?
Well, yes, more interested.
Yeah. So now that there's an interest, can you see, if you look at the colours coming out of you as a group now, can you see the whole group changed in its colour as soon as their interest was piqued? as soon as the desire to go, what if my future is something about knowing this answer to this question, then, and it's going to affect my future, I want to know how it's going to affect my future. Yeah. And you can see straight away, even the feelings you now have changed.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we want to do now is project those feelings towards this non-existent God. We want to ask, if you exist, I want evidence into coming at me through these feelings.
So, and there's no way to present evidence to all of us as a group?
Only if all of you have an honest feeling.
But what you're saying is that's individually evidence?
Correct.
But what about, is there no way to present collectively?
Well, there's plenty of collective evidence, but a lot of it you won't see until you get this individual acknowledgement.
Okay.
This is why I say try the experiment first. There's we could have hours of discussion about evidence about God's existence, you follow? But at the end of the day, it's not going to be the fastest way to the conclusion. Mm.
Okay. All right. So we need to
have that sort of childlike desire to know.
Okay.
I want to know the truth about this matter, whether God exists or not. And I'm open to the fact that he's not going to give me a thought, but he has to give me a feeling instead. Let's try that.
It seems like many of us now have that feeling.
Mm-hmm. And what's the feeling?
That, yes.
God does exist. Yeah.
But we wouldn't usually call that evidence now.
Mm. But if feelings are things, you can see the feelings coming out of our audience, and they are things.
Yeah.
So they do present evidence of how the audience is feeling. So why wouldn't feelings be a part of your evidence?
Well, because it's so individual.
Your feelings are individual, but God's, if you can feel, each of you, when you feel the feeling, you're all feeling the same feeling.
That's true.
So the feeling coming from God is the same for all of you.
Yes.
It hasn't been created by you, obviously.
Well, but we can't see the feeling from God. We can only see the feelings in each of us.
All right, well, let's look at the logic of that. If God does exist, then God would have to exist outside of the universe he or she created.
Okay.
If God exists outside of the universe, then the way God transmits feelings has to be different to the way humans transmit feelings. And so if you can see it in a human, it would have to probably be unseen, unless you had the eyes open, some kind of facility or faculty open. For the most part, you might not see it coming from God.
It just seems very frustrating. It seems very still not tangible in some way. The feeling exists, yes.
All right. Well,
but shouldn't we have hard proof?
Well, there is a lot of hard proof, which we'll look at in a minute. But let's just experiment a bit more with this feeling stuff, shall we? Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, so here we are. We've had the first feeling, and many of you had a feeling you wanted to know, and the answer was, it felt like a yes, right? Yeah. Okay. So the Christian belief of God is that God is a triune God. Let's do the same thing. Are you three gods in one?
No.
So the answer, the first one was yes, and this one's no. Mm-hmm. So now it's becoming clearer that there is yes and no, not just yes.
Yeah.
Okay? So this would suggest an intelligence where these feelings are coming from,
yeah.
Wouldn't it?
It would.
It would. So let's ask more evidence that are humans God? Some people believe that.
No.
No is the answer to that. And let's ask the question, are there a lot of gods? Are you a collective of gods?
No, but it's funny. It almost feels like all of those questions were answered in the first yes.
Correct. So when God answered you first, there was nuances in your feelings, weren't there, that said, all of a sudden, not only did you learn about God, yes, exists, but also not multiple gods, not, it was an individual, and so forth, right? So the nuances in the feelings are quite clear at times if you're open to them, where you can read a lot into those feelings. Does that make sense? And interestingly enough, consistent for all of you asking the question. Even though you've got different personalities, different natures, different history, there is a consistency of the fact.
Okay, so now that we've answered that question, now it seems, well, now there's just a lot of worry.
Correct.
I feel like it's very hard now to
Well, let's look at our worries.
Remain here.
Yeah, stay for a bit and let's look at the worries, because we need to address the worries. So what are you worried about?
Well, just the implications of this.
Mm-hmm. Is there any area you'd like to ask God about the implications? How about the pain? Is my pain associated with things I did on earth? We're asking the same entity. So the answer to that is yes. Did I do the things on earth because of my beliefs that I had that were false on earth? Yeah. Is there a direct relationship between my beliefs and the actions I took and then the pain I am consequently now suffering? Yes. So now we've established the answer to some of your questions. Now, before you leave though, I want to talk about one other thing to do, and that is, if God has thoughts, then and these thoughts are transmitted through feelings, the question now becomes, what does God feel about you? That'd be a valid question. Does God have feelings about you?
Yeah.
That'd be a valid question, wouldn't it? So again, you can project these feelings towards God. Can you help me feel what you feel about me?
It's a lot of things.
Yeah. Can you see some of the things where God loves you, cares about you, desires your happiness and welfare, knows your personality, knows your nature? But there's also other things, wasn't there, like a bit of an exposure of the things you did wrong and why those things were wrong and so forth, coming from that same source. Does that make sense? Yeah. One other question we can ask: if I deal with those things, can I be forgiven for them?
Yeah. It's very hard now, though.
Very hard now because it's a lot emotional now, isn't it? And most of you are not used to emotion at all, which is a consequence of actually not believing in anything other than physical, you see.
Thank you. Thanks for answering our question.
Yeah. I understand you'd like to go now. Can I just, before you go, I'll just ask some spirits who have been through the same thing you're now going through to come. You see them now. They will help answer some more questions when you're ready to ask them. I just wanted to make the introduction so you know you're not alone in dealing with these things. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So feel free to feel your feelings, Coral. The rest of the group, I know and understand it's difficult now, and we just need to have some feelings about these things. Any questions that you guys have as an audience about that? Can we go to Enrique first? Back to on the side, and who on the side? Justin.
About beliefs and principles. So I've started having like the spirit, physical consequences, and pain.
Can I stop you? Every time we've opened it up to questions after channeling, most of you have got onto your personal things. This is indicating a fair degree of sort of selfishness in your involvement with what's going on.
Can I say?
I want to first address the questions that you've got about what just happened.
Many of you are quite tough to channel in front of. Actually, it's very their feelings. They feel very exposed in this process,
and
when
very
you guys,
judged and.
When you guys, it's quite. And then when you're rustling this thing continually through the whole thing, because they are struggling, and I'm having to really concentrate to it's not concentrate with my mind, but just really keep rapport with them. And then when you continually, your feelings are disconnected or unkind towards them, they feel that, and they feel like, I want to
get away from here.
Yes, and emotionally, it's quite tricky to keep the rapport there, when also I'm being pulled away through different things. So, yeah. Sometimes I question the wisdom of doing this in this forum for that reason, because I feel it's not a service to the spirits then, because it feels they feel restricted in their ability to just be themselves. But it's just about coming to love your brothers and sisters, whether they're in the spirit world or on earth.
Yeah, and this is what I'm getting at with you, Enrique, but also the whole audience is many of you do not love anyone other than yourself, and even then you don't love yourselves well, because you don't actually care for yourself the way God feels you should care for yourself. So what we noticed, particularly in Western countries, but particularly in the United States, everyone is very self-involved. You only really think about yourselves for the most part and your own feelings, and this makes it very, very difficult to help spirits in front of you, but it also makes it very difficult to help you, because you always think everything for you is unique to you. You follow me? So I firstly want to only answer questions about what just happened. Can we start there?
Justin?
Yeah.
So I'm quite taken aback by not just today, but even Henri last week. Their ability to use their conscience to really ask clear questions, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just reviewing how. Yeah.
When you become a spirit, you are automatically as sensitive as you would be when you're a child to everything. So that means you're sensitive to pain, you're sensitive to pleasure, but mostly you're experiencing pain. You're also sensitive to any emotion coming from an outside source. You're as sensitive to it as a child would be. And the reason why is that a lot of the filters you have about sensitivity come through your sensory apparatus of your physical body. So once you get rid of the physical body, and you have not yet developed or shut down your spirit body has all of these senses that are now completely open, and they were completely closed when you're in your physical state. So now you're sensitive to every nuance of pain that you have. Every single tiny pain in your body, you got a heightened sensitivity to. Every tiny thing coming from another person, any feeling coming from another person, you're now highly sensitive to. You're highly sensitive to everything. This also, when you start communicating with God, means that you become highly sensitive to the nuances of emotion coming from God. Make sense? Just like God would be a person who transmits feelings and thoughts to you, and of course feelings, not thoughts. Thoughts come up as a result of the feelings, as you just had illustrated. He had feelings. God gave him a feeling about God. Coral had feelings about God, And then in the process of feeling those feelings, all these thoughts come about what God's nature was as a part of those feelings. Now, that's how God communicates via conscience. But Coral was sensitive to it because she's not limited anymore by the shutdown of the physical body senses that you have been doing to yourself for years and years and years. Yeah? Now, a little child, by the way, like a 1-year-old or even a newly born baby, has the same level of sensitivity. This is why when it's born, it cries all the time. Because it's got a lot to cry about with all the barrages of feelings coming at it that it doesn't know anything about, but it's sensitive to feeling.
But the child obviously can't tune into the conscience because that's an expression of will, so they have to seek it. So it's the same for you.
Yeah.
When you want to seek God's truth about something, that has to be an expression of your free will.
Yeah.
You know, you have to really want it, just like Coral had to.
Yeah. Now, Coral recognised her pain and as a result really wanted to do something about it. That's what drew her, and that's why she was encouraged to come to our group last week. Right? If she wasn't that sensitive to her pain, she would never have been able to come last week to the group and to listen to anything. So they're in a much more prepared state than the majority of you in the audience are to actually feel things. You follow? Yeah. And I can't emphasize that enough. Many of you believe you understand divine truth, but from an emotional perspective at this stage, there's very little understanding of it. And she was having to feel things, and it was sensorily feel as well as emotionally feel. Many of you are detuned from your senses almost as much as you're detuned from your emotions. That's why you can cut yourself and not even notice till you see blood somewhere. You know, that's how you become that sensitive that you can even have a physiological function occur in your body, such as the nervous system being triggered, and you have no idea it's happening because you're detuned from the senses. You know? You won't have that luxury in the spirit world. You know, you won't have the luxury of being able to detune from it.
Can we call it a luxury?
Well, yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a luxury, but many of you believe it's a luxury at the moment. But you use it like it's a comfort. Yeah.
Go to Aaron at the back.
Yeah.
I guess for Coral and the spirits who came, after they have passed, what kind of resources do they have to learn? And I know you talked about conscience, but I think is there any other resource available?
It very much depends, Aaron, upon their desires. So if they have no desires, then there'll be no resources. If they have a smidge of desire in a certain direction, then there'll be whatever the direction their desires are, resources will be supplied. So when a person initially passes in the spirit world, usually they have, most of these passed from old age, and by that stage, the person generally has nullified most of their desires. You've taught yourself to not have any, because any one of them might disappoint you. So you after a time, most people on earth tune out of their truthful desires. And their fundamental desire is to not have a desire, to not have feelings, to not have feelings get triggered, to use their mind. And this entire group was heavily involved in using their mind to suppress their true desires, to suppress their true feelings. So the problem with that is that desire is what brings things to you in the universe. This applies on earth as well, but also in the spirit world. See, at the moment, many of you have created lives mirroring your desire, and you don't realize it. So some of you have wealth, that mirrors your desire for wealth. Some of you don't have any wealth, but that mirrors your desire to not have any. Right? Some of you have a partner, but that's because you had a desire to have a partner. Some of you don't have a partner, but that's because you didn't desire one. Or you've been disappointed by one, and so now you're worried, and so you don't want to have one anymore. Right? Desire drives everything. So when they pass, and they have no desires, there's very little help that can be given until a desire is expressed. Make sense? Now, in their case, the reason why they were brought to the first group in San Diego here was because they had the beginnings of some desire to know why they were in pain. And that beginning of a desire, which, by the way, they've been in pain a long time. I think Coral passed in late 1950s. And so she's had pain since in the 60s to now, which is a period of 60 years she's been in pain. It's taken 60 years for her to develop a small desire to know why she's in pain. Does that make sense? Yeah. And now that she's developed that desire, now she can be given assistance to help her with that desire. That's how the law works.
One clarification, when you said she was brought here, so the desire just transformed the location, or was there some agent or agency there?
Yeah, yes, there were spirit friends who we have who are constantly searching for people all through the spirit world who are ready to exercise a desire in harmony with some degree of love of themselves or others, right? And when they find such people, they go, right, now what's our best course of action to help this particular person? Last week, Mary and I gave that opportunity to occur in a group. So these people thought, well, let's take them to the group to talk about beliefs, because they need to understand how their beliefs have changed the course of their entire life now, right? And so they were brought by some of our spirit friends to the group. And this is why we often have anywhere up to 20 or 30 million spirits listening to any seminar we give, because there's been many of our spirit friends in the spirit world bringing groups of people from all sorts of places who they've found who are ready to exercise a desire in a direction or another, and they bring them to the group so they listen to some information and connect to some feelings on earth that they've been avoiding, and this helps the spirits then who are helping them to be able to educate them further. Make sense? Yeah.
Maybe Anna now?
So I noticed when you first started channeling that a lot of us got really droopy.
Yep.
Very, very droopy. A lot of us, I was fighting it. What's going on?
Fidgeting, droopy,
Yeah,
making
all
noises,
like
coughing.
a lot of us.
Yeah. All that happens because you're very uncomfortable with the emotions they are feeling. So what happens for many of you, you don't realise how much you're shutting down emotion. And you don't realise how much you're shutting not only yours down, but also your sensitivity to everyone else. Make sense? And so when a group comes who have some fairly painful emotions that actually very similar to some of the emotions you're going to have to experience, but don't want to, then you go into this denial state. And the denial state is shut down your senses, shut down your emotions, shut down your intellect. Allow spirits to come and nurse you through that process as well. So you often become sort of almost overcloaked by a spirit in that place as well. And this is all motivated by the desire to avoid how they feel, so that you can avoid how you feel about how they feel.
And John was just saying, because their issue was in particular with what's the implication of my beliefs now that I'm here, how's that affected my spirit life? And a lot of people here don't really want to look at that. Don't want to look at, well, what are my beliefs and my actions here doing to my future?
To your future life. Or even to your life right now and from now on.
Yeah, because I feel wide awake right now.
Yeah.
Right out.
Yeah.
And all the noise stopped as soon as we stopped channeling.
As soon as we stopped channeling. Yeah.
There was a lot of noise.
A lot of the noise happens because you're all basically emotionally fidgeting. You're all distressed one way or another about what we're talking about. Some of you have disbelief, others of you have belief, but you're worried about it. Others of you are concerned about what it's going to mean for you. And so you're zoning out of a lot of things and not realising it.
Yeah, and that's why it was so difficult, because all it feels like from here is like, go away, stop that, stop this. And we're trying to give the gift to these guys to help them, and a gift to you guys to sort of help you understand the principles.
Not only that, to become face to face with this will be your future at some point if you're not careful. Like,
yeah, but there's it's quite tense emotionally, actually.
I was going to ask, is that why, like, because I felt it too, and I was like, so.
And it is tough. You think about it. Let's say you pass today, and the next 60 years of your life was just pain, and every moment of your day and night is no sleep, is pain, and you've experienced that for 60 years.
So that could be our future.
Well, for many, it's going to be your future, unless you change something. It's going to be your future. And detuning from it is not going to help you in the long run. It might help you right now to think like, many of you have the thought, at least I'm not that blocked, or at least I'm not going to be in that place. Not true. Many of you think you have a belief in God and you have none at all. And many of you are acting out of harmony with love, with the beliefs you have about God. So, like I said earlier, yesterday, many of you believe you're God. And so in that place, you're making up your own rules. You're making up your own standards. You're making up your own life. You're doing a lot of things that you don't realise are really damaging to yourself and to others. And you don't realise the consequence of it and how intricate the consequence of things are. Right? Now, with this group, I could have talked to her about that, but it wouldn't have been the fastest way to help her realise some things. You follow? So I could have talked to her about everything she did on earth and the consequence she's now experiencing. And it would have been a very emotionally confronting discussion as well. So I go, well, it's much better if I can connect her to God in some way and connect her to some of our guides in some way before she has that terribly confronting work to do, rather than afterwards, because afterwards I'm possibly not going to be able to do it. So yes, for many of you, you don't understand yet that when you pass, your sensory feelings are going to be heightened, like intensely heightened, and very sensitive to pain. So every pain you are now suppressing, you're going to be very sensitive to one way or the other. You've not taught yourself how to shut it down spiritually for most of you. Now, you can shut it down spiritually as well, by the way, but I don't want to give you any secrets about how to do that, because otherwise you'll be in a worse state, right? But many of you don't know how to do that, and because of that, when you pass, you're going to experience this heightened sense of sensory experience, along with a heightened sense of emotional experience. And it's going to be so confronting that you're barely going to be able to think a thought, let alone do anything else. Right?
This is why we emphasize changing your will in relation to your emotion, love, your seeking of truth, all of these, and having faith that change is possible.
Yep.
All of those things, once they move from your head into your soul awareness, into your soul reality, then you can change so quickly, on earth and in the spirit world. Before that happens, it doesn't.
Long drawn out tooth-pulling exercise.
That's right. And when you enter the spirit world, it doesn't really matter what you've heard in your intellect, because you'll be quite consumed by your emotional will.
Yeah. So most people think, I've learned divine truth on earth, I'm just going to put off dealing with any of it, but now I know divine truth on earth. As soon as I pass, I'll be able to ask for the right people to come along and everything will be fine. Not true. None of that is true. What's going to happen as soon as you pass is every addiction you have is going to be at its full height. Every emotion you have is going to be at its full height. Every sensory feeling you have is going to be at its full height. And you are going to be so overwhelmed by it that you're not even going to be able to think at all, for the most part. You'll find thoughts so difficult, right? And most people then try to, in the spirit world, they try to numb themselves out of that a bit and do the things. But now they're in the spirit body, they can sort of learn how to do that a bit. So over time, they might numb themselves out and whatever. But Right at the beginning, it is very, very confronting.
So, sorry, one more. I had a friend that passed, and
Yep.
I'm thinking, like, I never feel them.
Yep.
And now I'm thinking, I know why.
Why is that?
Because they never dealt with anything. They're probably not thinking.
No, that's not why. Not why, Anna.
Okay.
Got any other ideas why?
Yeah.
What's the other idea why?
I'm scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're scared to know where she is? What's going on? What's going on?
Is it he or she? It's both.
Both, yeah. What's happening to them? You're scared to find out what's happening to them, where they are, how that applies to your own life.
Yeah.
How that applies to your own life. And you know, in your mind, they've just lived a sort of normal life? Normalish
Normalish, yeah.
life? And you're too frightened to find out where they are, what they're doing.
See, most people, when somebody passes, they just want to hear, everything's wonderful and they still love me. That's pretty much what anyone wants to hear.
You go to
from
a medium
medium
session.
Yeah.
What do they say?
It's all good now.
It's all good now.
and I
Go to
love
a
you.
spiritual church. What do they say? It's all good now.
They're in a
all
better
good now.
place.
You're in a
Yes.
better place. Blah blah blah. Yeah.
And we love you. I love you. And
You're so gullible.
Here's what you should do with your life. And don't forget the blanket in the top drawer. That kind of stuff, you know. And no one really wants. When we love someone, we want to know, like, we're open-hearted to their experience. And often when you have a fear, like Jesus expressed, it closes your heart off.
Yeah.
Even if you were more open-hearted to them when they were on earth.
Yeah. So you will, if you truly love them and want to know them, you will find you open up and you go, wow, they're not in a necessarily good place, and I can feel how bad it is for them. And actually, these kind of things would be good for you to trace back. Okay, if it's bad for them, what did they do on earth that caused it to be bad for them there? You know, that kind of thing.
And often if you're a point of contact for them, it can help you and them if you open up to them, you know? If you're willing to hear from them about their experience now, because they might be more connected to the earth because they haven't dealt with their earth life, you can point things out to them and say, even if you don't yet fully believe it, like, hey, I've heard this, you know, I've heard. And also it can help you reflect on, well, okay, if that's what's happening for them, what am I denying, or what could I look at?
What choices am I making in my life, you know, that might lead to the same consequence. Yeah. Most of us don't want to have any linkage between our current life and our future consequences. So what we'd prefer to do is ignore any truth about the future life that's presented to us. Now, our friends that we're open to emotionally that pass are the most able generally to share what that future life for us is probably going to be like, given the fact that they're our friends and we've spent a lot of time with them. And we've probably got to be in a similar place in many cases. So the majority of us on earth don't want to know. And this is why we person died, we sort of almost close the whole thing down. We just have a few tears, grief ourselves about the loss of them, but no interest in now what's happening to them afterwards. Yeah, generally that's the case. And it's all driven by our own fear of what might happen to us when we pass. Yeah. Very few people experience great joy when they pass. Most experience extreme suffering when they pass. Reason why Mary and I are here to try to
help you have your pain and see
them.
the pain related to your sin, have it now, so that the rest of your existence can be happy.
Yeah.
Because sin is finite, you know. As long as you change your belief. Remember, Jesus drew up on the board. There's belief that drives emotion, and then we have physical problems. So if you change, if you deal with your emotions and change your beliefs, then those emotions, those painful emotions, never reoccur because all your beliefs now generate happiness and love and connection and all of those things. But if you don't work on those beliefs and the principles governing, the universe, then you can create more pain for yourself, whether it's on earth or in the spirit world. But if you change those beliefs, that's a for life thing, you know. That's no more of
A
those.
forever thing.
A forever thing, yeah.
Yeah.
For life here and the rest as well.
Brilliant.
We come back to, I'm sorry, I've just forgotten your name. Yes, was you in the white shirt? Yes? Yes, Wendy. Wendy.
Sorry.
I'm having a lot of confusion about earthbound spirits versus the spirit that's moved on.
Yep.
If you can explain better about that. Or
What's the
what's
difference?
happening? Yeah, what's happening with...
So I'll have a stab and you can clarify, okay? An earthbound spirit is someone who doesn't want to leave the earth plane, if you like.
Or the surrounds of the earth.
Yes. So they want to remain attached to earthly goings on, whether that's their family or whether they're involved in addictions, or they just don't actually want to
even be a
face.
job or something.
Yes, a job, something earthly they want us to remain involved with. And sometimes it's just fear of going
Anywhere
to
else.
the spirit world, because people have a sense before they pass that maybe there's some things that I've got to face that I don't want to face. And depending on how much the person is resisting that, they can remain earthbound for years and years and years and years.
Centuries.
And they often become involved with people, you know. Many spirits that are channeled by mediums are earthbound. And they're like, oh, I'm not in pain anymore. And
Let's be more honest. Almost all.
Almost all, yeah. So they're not having their spirit life existence anymore. They comment on earthly things because they're still involved with earthly things. And sometimes if they had a kind of average life on earth, they think, oh, I left my physical body, things are a bit better, and I can waft around and, you know, hang out with my grandkids and this is it, you know. But that doesn't last forever. And the discontent grows, and the sense that that they should be somewhere else also grows as well. Now, spirits, in contrast to that, there's spirits who enter the spirit life when they pass. And they go through a process of understanding that they've passed. Often they're greeted by people, you've heard stories about that. They are confronted with their life on earth and their sin.
Not immediately though, often.
No, often there's like an adjustment period where you enter, and then, but if you are staying in the spirit life, if you like, you are forced now to deal with your sin through the environment you live in, depending on how active you are in that process. Like if you're seeking to become more loving, you'll get so much assistance in the form of people and experiences and all of these things to help you to grow and to keep progressing. If you're fighting that and you're in resistance, then your environment is the major thing that becomes your trigger for change until your will is involved. Now, some spirits enter the spirit life, they start to have that existence, and they're like, yeah, I'm not going for this much. And they start to come back to the earth and be involved in different things on earth. Because their will is still, they want sin, then they will do that. So that's the difference. An earthbound spirit has never kind of left the earth plane. Sometimes what we call negative spirit influence is the latter group.
Say that again?
Sometimes what we call negative spirit influence, when you hear us refer to it, sometimes it's earthbound spirits, but often it is spirits who have some awareness of their sin and have some awareness that they can influence things on earth to keep avoiding their sin or having other people sin so they can partake in that. Both groups are involved in that, earthbound spirits and spirits who've entered the spirit life.
So some enter the spirit life and then become earthbound.
They sort of make a choice.
They make a choice to stay only on earth afterwards. They're not happy with their home. Many of you, when you first pass, you're not going to be happy with your home. If you passed right now, you wouldn't be happy with your home. And you go, I had a better home on earth. So many of you would decide to go back and live in your home on earth. Because it was more comfortable than your home in the spirit world. Does that make sense? So you might know where your home is and everything in the spirit world, not be very happy about it, not know how to change it, not know the reasons why that home is yours now, and so you go, I don't like that, I'm going back to earth. And so the earth's in a hell condition. So as long as you have passed into a condition that's the same as the earth or better, you can visit the earth any time. And so you go, well, I'd rather live in my own house at home, back in San Diego or back in Oregon or whatever, you know. And so that's what you do. And many people do that for years. Like, they haunt their own house on earth, literally, like 4 years, because they're not happy with their spirit house. Yeah. And then, of course, you know, a lot of the people they were connected to are still living in the house, so they get to, you know, try to talk to the people, and after a while they learn, oh, I can have these strong feelings towards a person, the person will get that.
Yeah.
So they start, oh, this is great. No, I can influence that person. You know, my daughter's not bringing up her child the right way, so influence her, you know, through my feelings to bring her up the way I think she should bring her up, you know.
A lot of you have familiar, like ancestral spirits.
Yeah.
With you. A lot.
Yeah. Or I pass and I'm back in my house and I realise my husband's been cheating on me the entire time. Right? This happens too. And you go, wow, he's been cheating on me the entire time. I'm going to make him pay for that. I'm going to make his life a misery as much as I can. You know, influence the woman he's cheating on me with. You know, influence my husband.
Go and influence my daughter and tell her, don't trust men.
Don't trust, you know.
Don't trust your husband. You know, a lot of husbands and wives have a lot of conflict, even more after one of their parents dies, because the parent, if they never approve, just comes along and projects at the child. So.
Yeah, to the point where the child just decides to, the grown child just decides to do something different.
And some of you have problematic relationships with your parents. It is far better to deal with your issues with that parent inside, you know, your stuff you're holding on to before they pass. Because trust me, after they pass, they're going to be attracted because you're in a rage. You're all cranky with them all the time. They're going to come all the time.
Every time you're cranky, every time you feel about them,
they'll be there. And if they don't have any development, they'll want to argue with you or pressure you or guilt you, or all the holes you have can actually be more exploited after a person passes than
because they're invisible, right? You don't know what's happening. Many of you are unable to tell the difference between a thought package that you have and a thought package that's coming to you from someone else. Remember last week we were talking about that a bit with regard to the we versus you versus I do something. You know, most of you don't realise that you're thinking we or you every time you talk to yourself, and actually that's just a spirit having a chat with you about what they think you should do and so forth. Many people on earth are just not aware at all. We lack education. Yeah.
But you know, I know now watching all your faces, some of you just go, oh, how will we ever, you know, but actually what we're teaching you about the principles is the answer to all of these issues, whether you're a person on earth or you're in the spirit world or you're earthbound, it all works for everyone. You know.
But I don't want to calm you down about it.
That's not what I just did.
Because you've got to have to go through some feelings about all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the more you get calmed down about it on earth, you think about the average medium, you know, when you go to spiritualist church or something, you sit down and some people do some meetings, the average things they're average going, everything's fine now, you're all fine, let's talk about your family and how to help you here and how to help you there. And most of the spirits who are doing this through mediums, if they're actually mediums at all, are actually spirits who are in a lot of pain and suffering themselves, and they have really no idea about their own life at all, and they just don't want to tell you. Because they want to reassure you that it's not that bad when you pass, when they feel it is bad. But they just don't want to worry you while you're alive about it.
Yeah, and sometimes mediums lack the integrity to pass it on as well.
Yeah.
They feel like, oh, I'm going to go out of business if I, you know, really
If I tell people that it's not as good as what everybody wants to believe, then maybe some people will no longer pay me to do my mediumship anymore.
Or you'll leave distressed, and and then that won't be good. They'll be responding.
It's not good for further business.
Yeah, or it's not good for you. A lot of people think, oh, it's not good for you. If you start to have a feeling as a result of a conversation, then that's not good. And so I can't pass that on. That wouldn't be loving. I've heard mediums say that wouldn't be loving.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great dishonesty in what's happening with mediumship on Earth.
If we come to Catherine on this side and Cheng on that side.
I wondered with Coral, first of all, what was the size of that group? Did you know or not?
It's pretty big.
And they're not earthbound. They said they visit the earth sometimes, but okay.
Yeah, not earthbound. They're in too much pain to be earthbound.
Yeah. And also, because she had, and many of them had performed abortions, do you think, because, you know, as Anna mentioned, this heaviness and restlessness, do you think, especially with the U.S. election and abortion being, you know, fiery right now, I guess it always has been, but it's highlighted. I was thinking, are we also being, we as an audience, affected by spirits who are inflamed about that, or?
I think it's more likely that many of you have had abortions or been involved in abortions, so yeah, that's more likely to be the cause of this.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and also the attitudes that cause abortion, many of you have, even if you haven't had an abortion. So an example of attitudes that cause abortion are things like feeling like it's hard on a woman, it's easier on the man. You know, having sex outside of marriages or outside of a committed relationship is easier on the man. It's harder on the woman because she might have a child. So she needs to have the choice to be able to get rid of that child if she wants to. You know, many of you also realise that bringing up a child is difficult, and if you're in a situation where you don't feel like you have a lot of support, then many people have the belief that that's the time to have an abortion because you don't have support. So there's a lot of false beliefs which trigger the abortion. The abortion is the effect of the sin that exists in the attitude, right? And so many times some of you have not had an abortion, but it's only because there wasn't the proper opportunity for it to happen, not because it was a choice, but because it never had the circumstances. You were careful or whatever, and never had the circumstances where an abortion may have occurred. But you do have the emotion that would have committed one if you had the unfortunate circumstance of getting pregnant under certain circumstances.
I have a couple questions about the mediumship.
Yeah.
So with mediumship, spirit influence, those thought packets, how was it discovered and exactly like when? Like how did all that happen?
It's been around since the very first humans passed. Yeah, so when a woman and a man passed, they weren't the first humans who passed, by the way. There were other of their progeny who passed first. But the first humans who passed, they could start influencing people on Earth. And because there was more emotional openness to the potential of their being in existence after passing at the time, that influence was greatly felt, unfortunately, in a very negative direction. So the spirits who originally passed, the very first ones, were passed into a very poor state, and in the process of being in a poor state, they influenced people on Earth poorly, you know, out of harmony with love. But the people on Earth knew they were being influenced, but happy to go along with the influence, and things degraded very rapidly over a short period of human history, just a few thousand years, into states that are way worse than we have today. Yeah.
And then my next question is, I remember you guys talking about how there's like universities in the spirit world, still higher education learning. Like
There is, yeah.
How does it feel for those spirits to come back here and get educated by someone in the, I guess, physical?
It's tricky because most spirits believe someone in the physical can't educate them. So they have a belief that, you know, what's the point of coming back to Earth to get educated when nobody they've ever met on Earth ever had the education to tell them where they were right now, right? So it's pretty tricky for most. For us, it's a little bit different, obviously, because when they come to us, they can see we do understand their predicament, and we do understand the full reasons as to why they're in the predicament they are. And so many of those spirits obviously are more interested in having conversations with us. But when it comes to having a conversation with a medium, many of them go, well, what's the point of me even asking a single question of that medium about where I am right now, why I am where I am, and everything. And even these people, the mediums who believe they're leading people to the light, you know, most of the spirits around them go, where's the light? I don't see any light. You know, what light are you talking about? There's no light here, you know. But unable to be honest about that with the medium because the medium has that belief. And so most of the time they feel that those people are not helping them at all.
So with that, with people that do mediumship here and feel like they want to help spirits with all their own injuries, is it kind of like better just to stop that?
Well, it's never good to stop a loving action. What you need to do is refine the loving action so that it's more loving, right? So many of you who are involved in mediumship on a day-to-day basis, you don't understand how much you're doing it in an unloving manner, right? And in fact, for many of you, you're getting completely hoodwinked as to who is with you. You don't know who's with you. You don't know what their motive is. You don't understand their motive. And the reason why is because you've got your own addictions that you're unwilling to address. Make sense?
Yeah.
So, as we said earlier, dealing with your own addiction, remember the discussion I had with Michael, dealing with your own addiction is very, very important if you're going to do any work with spirits, because in the end, they will, there's many malicious spirits who will just fool you into believing you're actually communicating with someone who wants to progress when really all they're trying to do is get a bit of a hold on you or whatever. You know, there's many spirits who will do that. And we see that happening with people who are listening to Divine Truth around the earth who set up a mediumship group. Frequently it's completely out of harmony with what we would consider love to be, right? And the main reason why is because of the addictions of the individuals involved.
Yeah. Everyone's a medium. No one's not. So it's pointless to sort of try to ignore that faculty. It's like, oh, I'm just not going to smell anymore because, you know, it might smell nasty sometimes, you know.
Of course, some people do that.
They do. And I don't advise that either because you miss out on
some people who
smelling
can't smell
great
any single thing, right? And there's also some people who do that with their feelings.
Yeah.
I've had enough hard feelings, I don't want to feel anymore.
But it's not good for you.
No.
And so it's the same with mediumship. It's like, don't tune it out. Instead, refine it, as Jesus said. Become more sensitive to your own feelings, and that will help you to be sensitive to your own feelings and your own motivations. That will help you to be more sensitive to the feelings and motivations of spirits around you. But if you enter mediumship in an addiction, all you're going to do, like to meet an addiction, all you're going to do is attract spirits who also want to meet their addictions, and it will end up worse for both you and them. Yeah.
For them and you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So what if we come to Jordan here and who's got the other one? Oh yeah, Tyson.
My question is, if the conversation would have continued, would you have then asked about them receiving God's love?
Yeah, that would have been my next protocol. They did receive a little bit of it actually in this conversation, but because some of them did have a bit of a longing for that. Once they realised there was a God, when I asked them how does God feel about you, and to ask that question, some of them did ask that question in that moment.
Yeah, Coral did.
Yeah, but their emotions got so difficult to handle here, they needed to have a place of privacy to go and deal with their emotions. And so I was conscious of the fact of how distressed they were staying here, which was more distressed than, say, the spirits we talked to last week. And also more distressed than the spirits we talked to yesterday. And when I feel that level of distress in them, I go, yeah, I can feel you just need to go for a bit, you know. And Mary and I can talk with them again if they want to be talked to
they might
again.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just pass. Did you have your hand up, Maya? Yeah, if you passed you and go to passing.
So a lot of the principles and qualities that you've focused on and emphasized, they all seem to have a fundamental component, if you want to grow and develop them, that if you can figure out this key thing, you can make it all happen. And of course, it's a sincere desire.
Yeah.
That's like the drive and impetus and motivation to take action.
Yeah, sincerity.
Yeah, sincere desire. Sincerity or sincere desire. Say
Yeah, yeah.
So, you've talked about desire in the past. If you want to develop desire, if you act lovingly on your desires and passions, they grow.
Yeah.
Or, you work through your fears and false beliefs and sin, then you can get rid of some blocks, which will be easier to activate.
Have desires, yeah.
So I've done a little bit of both of those, so I have a little bit of faith in some areas of my life.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it seems like the chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
So the chicken representing a sincere desire.
This is not a question about the channeling, is it?
Well, they had a desire.
This is another personal.
No, okay.
Somehow you're manipulating it into a personal question.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
Sure.
Isn't it?
Well, I feel it applies to everybody, because basically,
well, I
essentially.
agree it does, but it's not the subject matter at hand that
Okay.
we're talking about. Yeah.
All right, we can go to the next question.
Yeah, yeah. So I have spoken much about desire. My suggestion is listen more to that, what was spoken about with desire. It is a very important thing for your future, yes, but let's stay on topic about asking questions about this experience.
So the amount of pain that Coral was in,
Yeah.
did that mean she came from like a level of hells, or is it just the first sphere? Oh.
Yeah, she was in the hells. She'd been involved in quite a few abortions. She'd been involved in teaching people that God doesn't exist, which has its own penalties. There's quite a number of things she was involved in, helping people detune from their emotions. There was also, at times, she was involved in I think she did some theses and so forth, which involved some experiments, and sometimes those experiments involved animals or humans. And as she pointed out, each of these things she was conscious of having an effect on her condition as to where she was. She wasn't understanding the relationship, of course, between all of that. But interestingly enough, the things she mentioned she had done on Earth was already her conscience working, telling her how those things were wrong, how they were bad. And so if you really listen to the channeling, you'll find that many of the things she mentioned were actually things that were starting to bother her, and ironically were also connected to the pain she was in. But she didn't realise the connection. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Who else had their hand up? Yeah, if we just go back to courts.
So I understand the link between the physical pain she was having being from beliefs about God and then the emotions and then the pain.
Not just that.
Yeah.
The belief she had caused her to have certain emotions, and that caused her to take certain sinful actions, which then had consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question I had was, for like a sixth sphere, atheist spirit,
Yep.
are there direct consequences to having false beliefs about God and physical pain for them? Or is it all gone?
Well,
through
a
the
sixth
spirit?
year atheist spirit, and by the way, there's not a lot of them, but there are some. And a sixth year atheist spirit basically has dealt with all of their unloving attitudes and treatments of people while they're on Earth. So if you imagine Coral never being introduced to God, never being introduced to the potentiality of receiving God's love or truth from God, and where she is right now, she would have to go through the law of compensation and reparation on every single thing she did out of harmony with that law, the law of love. And so that would probably take her, in her current condition, if she stayed, it would probably have taken another couple of 100 years at least to reach anywhere above, to reach the sixth sphere from her current condition would have probably taken, and this is just an estimate because it depends on desire, of course, but because she wasn't exercising up until recently a very strong desire, and also they weren't considering that God has laws that they've broken, even now, even in this discussion, she hadn't considered that. All she was doing at this stage was just feeling the relationship between her pain and maybe there's something wrong with her belief. But she didn't relate it to all the unloving things she's done in her belief. Right? Now, she would have had to go through all of that by herself or with some help from other spirits who are also on the natural love path. And that generally for someone in her current condition would have taken anywhere from 300 to 500 years. Right? Now, she would then be still an atheist, but be in the sixth sphere of the spirit world, having dealt with all of her past sin towards people. But of course, there's still a lot of blockage towards God. Yeah. Now, God doesn't punish you, or God's laws, you could say, don't correct you for having blockages towards God, except if you want to go to the seventh sphere.
So no physical pain.
Physical compensation.
So there's no, God, and this is very loving if you think about it from God's perspective. There is no physical pain for a person who does not have a belief in God, as long as they've dealt with all of their unloving treatment of their brothers and sisters. Right? And isn't that such a loving thing? Like, God's even saying to you, like, just because you don't want me, I'm not going to punish you for it. You'll be the perfect natural human, and I'm not going to punish you. I'm not going to correct you for it. You're allowed to be that. You're allowed to be that. And there'll be no pain. When I say no pain, it's very comparative, because you think of yourself in a state of happiness and contentment, but you don't understand what you're missing out on, because you never contemplated you're missing out on it. Right? And so for that reason, it doesn't feel to be any pain. Of course, once you enter the seventh sphere and realise what you've been missing out on for many years, often there's quite a lot of pain associated with that, the pain of regret, if you could call it that. But in the sixth sphere, yes, God is not going to stop you there's no laws that stop you from being the perfect natural man, even though you don't believe in God. In fact, there's no laws that stop you from being the perfect natural man, no matter what you believe, as long as you've done all the correction of how you treat your brothers and sisters and how you treat your environment and how you treat yourself and so forth. All that correction still needs to occur. That make sense, Courtney?
It does.
Yes.
No hands? Is there hands?
Hands, please.
Max?
Up the back, yeah.
And
There's a more of a technical question about the spirit world. I was wondering where the spirit world actually is, and how do the spirits come from hell to earth? Like you talked about the gates, but how does what happen?
Yep, well, it depends a bit whether they're what we call earthbound or whether they're actually in the hells. So in the earthbound state, they're actually living with us here on earth. So in your homes and on your streets and everywhere, there'll be miners from 100 years ago living in the mines, and there'll be, so living with us here on earth. So everywhere you go on earth, there is usually people living there, spirits living there, one way or the other.
yeah, and they're very influenced by the emotions of people, where they're drawn to, where they want to hang out, their emotions and the emotions
of
people.
Others. Yeah. Now, of course, they don't have to move very far because they're already here. There's no gate they have to move through. There's no different dimensional. They're in a different dimension than us. In other words, what you would classify as the vibrations of the matter that control them are much higher, and therefore we can't see them. Does that make sense to you? So anything that vibrates the slower things vibrate generally, the more we can see them. Is that the right way around? Have I said that right? And the faster they vibrate, well, it's actually different. It's better to call them wavelengths of light, actually. But they're in a spectrum of light. Their bodies are in a spectrum of light we can't see. But they're here.
Like our spirit body.
And we can't feel them, we can't touch them. Our physical bodies are in a different spectrum than their bodies are in. So that's why they're invisible to the majority of people. And in fact, they're invisible to your sense of sight. A person who says they see spirits is only seeing them with their spirit body. They can't actually physically see them with their eyes, their physical eyes, because their physical eyes are only tuned to a certain wavelength of light. Right? So when somebody says, I see them just as clearly as I see you, that means their spirit sense of sight is just as clearly defined as their physical sense of sight. So they can see both clear enough. Now, of course, when you start progressing through spheres, they are all now separated by dimensional space. So that is different to, say, an earthbound spirit who's just living here on earth with us.
But when they, when they come, like they just came then, they're just drawn through their desire, basically.
The fastest way to move is to feel something and go there because you feel it.
And most people in this state don't even think, I want to go there, so they just feel, I want to go there, so they're there. Yeah.
So, are the spheres like? Are they
locations?
What's the location? Is it in the physical universe?
Yeah, well, in the physical universe, but the physical universe is made up of different spectrums of light and different types of matter, and most of the matter in the universe you can't actually see anyway. 95%, probably more like 97%, something like that, of the matter in the physical universe is actually not tuned to the same frequency of light that you can see.
So the dark matter?
Yeah, what scientists are now calling dark matter, dark energy, and all those kind of things, they're all evidences of there being huge bodies of mass without there being any idea that mass is able to be seen by human sight.
So you're basically saying when you become a spirit, you can see all that.
Yeah.
And then to move through the
And in fact, our mass here, what we see here looks very, you sort of can walk through it. It looks very like permeable. You can see through it, you can walk through it when you're a spirit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But obviously we can't, not in a physical body, because the physical body can't. But as a spirit, you can.
And then so from, in that example, you said that they're from hell, or
yep.
So they just had a desire to learn more, and then they were drawn to the group, basically from hell to back to earth.
Correct.
They were brought by.
They were actually shown how to enter a portal that allowed them to come from hell to earth, and because normally they wouldn't even know. A lot of times it's their emotions that drew them to hell in the first place, and they didn't know that they actually used a portal when that happened. So they had to be shown. They didn't have enough knowledge that this is how you go from earth to that place. You have to exercise desire, and the portal's open, and then you can come. And they didn't know any of that, so they had to be shown all that in order to come. And then they come, and they listen. And now they know they can come back and forward, then they can come and back and forward and listen to anything. So they can listen to our presentation last week, they can listen to yesterday, they can even, like Mary and I talking by ourselves at home, they can listen to that. Now they know how to do that, you see. So quite often when Mary and I are talking by ourselves at home, there's millions of spirits listening to the conversation, particularly if it's a spiritually based conversation, which we have many of, and that's frequently the case.
So that portal is similar to what you call the gates from sphere to sphere?
Yeah.
Or is it?
Yeah, there's many of them. They all perform the same function, allowing you to go from one place to another. After a while, you don't need to use them, but in the first sphere, particularly in the hells, you need to use them because you have no idea how to go from one sphere to another or one because they're all light years, like hundreds of light years apart. You don't know how to transist hundreds of light years when you're in the first sphere generally. So you only do it through your feelings. Like, I want to go there, so I'm there. But you don't realise how you got there. And a lot of people who are bound to you don't even know how they're bound to you. You know, a lot of people, spirits who are connected to you and are connecting to parts of your organs, they don't know why they're connected to you specifically. They just feel like, I don't really like that person, and so I feel a bit of hatred to that person, and that feeling binds them to the person, and then they don't realise that, you know, and then other ones are family members, and they don't realise why they're sticking around their grandson on earth or whatever. They've got no idea. Like, they don't understand how the spirit world all works, so they don't have any idea how they got from one place to another, or why they got to that person or this person. Makes sense? Sorry, yeah.
So, and then in the sleep state, from what I understand, most of us, when we go to sleep, we're roaming around the earth. Most of the time, we're not going to the spirit world.
Well, it depends a lot on our aspirations. So for many of you, some of your aspirations are to continue what you were doing when you were awake, when you were asleep. And so in that case, you won't spend a lot of time in your spirit body in the spirit world. You'll spend more of it on earth here, you know, in an invisible state, visiting other people, doing other things, and so forth. Some of you who don't have those desires will feel more like you want to go to the spirit world and meet up with friends that you have not met here yet, you know, but you've met them there, and you want to talk to them, and you want to listen to them and hear about them and live some life there. So a lot of you also have that experience, and sometimes it's a combination of those experiences, most often, more often than not. And so, yes, even when you're asleep, you're getting educated about your life in the spirit world. When you pass, the purpose of that is when you pass, that you'll have some point of connection. Now, spirits who are like coral have not yet had a point of connection. Does that make sense? So they haven't yet experienced enough of the spirit world in their spirit body state to have a point of connection with their sleep state yet. So that she doesn't even know that, she's listening now, but she doesn't even know there's a sleep state. She didn't even know there was one. Is that
so she wouldn't remember all the things she did in her sleep state?
None of it. Not a single part of it she wouldn't remember. Yep. And she won't remember until there's a point of connection. And that point of connection needs to be an openness to the idea and concept, firstly, and then, of course, a desire to know. Once she has a desire to know, she'll be drawn to the locations she spent most of her time in the sleep, and then she'll have, when she drawn there, she'll recognise them and remember them, and then she'll remember what she learnt there, and it's a very interesting experience when you go through it, because there's all these amazing things that open up to you that you didn't realise you experienced, like 1/3 of your life that you didn't know you were having. For me, in the first century, my sleep state experience was seamless with my awake state. So I knew everything I was doing in my sleep state and my awake state, so I didn't have any disconnect from my sleep state or my awake state. But that I think from experience that I'm the only person who's ever experienced that. And it was because of the relationship with God that I didn't have any disconnect. Yeah. Now, in this life, I've had disconnect because there's a lot of things I haven't wanted to deal with or feel about the losses that I've experienced. And so there was a fairly large disconnect for all the 14 who have come in this life.
Mandy, and we go to Theo over here.
It's really quick. It's just about the family spirits that are hanging out with us.
Yep.
So they're not necessarily drawn to us in like a codependent addiction with us.
Mostly.
Yeah. They are still.
Mostly.
Okay.
Lots of
they sort of view it as an interest.
Yeah, they wouldn't call it a codependent addiction, but you know, a lot of us have the desire for approval from our family, and so when you have that, you know.
You want help from them,
Yeah.
you want security from them, there's all sorts of things you want from them.
Or sometimes, you know, set up through your relationship with your mum or your dad, there's certain things you want from men or women, and obviously your ancestors are from that line, they're used to giving those things, and so that creates sort of your side of the codependence, if you like. I'm needy for this from women, or I really want this from a man, and then they don't think, oh yes, I'll enter an addiction with Mandy. They think, I'm here to look after Mandy, or I'm here to love Mandy. This is how I do it.
Because they love the same way that they loved on earth.
Their definition of love.
Definition of love hasn't fundamentally changed.
And very often it's the same as yours, because you're coming from the same multi-generational injuries, and so that creates a rapport.
So if Mandy's desperate for some help rather than feeling her emotion, if great granny says, yeah, feeling emotion's bad, like that's bad, I'll go and help Mandy avoid her emotion, right?
Yeah, I think it's my grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much most people have at least one family member.
Who's quite interested in them.
At least one. Yeah, sometimes more. Yeah. Sometimes family members also get sort of what you would classify as very choosy about who of the family they get involved with, you know, because it's a lot to do with their personality as well. So sort of like, I don't really go for that grandson very much, you know, but Mandy, she's got a nice personality, I'll connect to her instead, you know, that kind of thing. You know, I like Mandy, so I'm going to connect to Mandy. And Mandy then also gives me some addictions that I like, and I can give her some addictions. But I'm not thinking they're addictions. I'm just thinking, Mandy wants this, and I'm helping her out. Yeah. And Mandy's helping me out. So I don't think of them as sins. I just think of them as we're being helpful with each other.
Can it also be like both of us want to suppress our feelings?
Yes.
So
Yeah, very much. Yeah,
and that's
a
helping.
huge effect. Yeah.
But, you know, the spirit can see that as helping you.
Yeah. Most spirits who have yet to take responsibility for their personal lives or their emotions in the spirit world would love to help you do the same. You know, they think they're doing you a massive favour, protecting you from all of the hardships of life. Yeah. Not understanding the full consequence on their soul or on yours.
So then it's kind of up to us, since we're learning about this, to kind of help ourselves and help them by...
Often you guys are more informed than they are about what's actually happening. So, you know, when you say, oh, I wish they'd stop, you know, I wish they'd stop influencing me, but actually you're more informed than they are about how to do that.
What the dynamic
you know, they've got no idea how to do that, because they haven't been educated yet. They're not even seeking education yet. So they have no idea how to disconnect from a person on earth that they're connected to. Many of them don't even know why they're with you. I just feel drawn to this person and I just hang around with them. Seems like a good idea. And that's what I'm doing. You know, they have no more clear idea or concept than that, unfortunately. There's very little education on earth about all of these things, is there? If you think about it, like none really. And most people who pass in a completely uneducated state. So naturally, it's a big world out there, invisible, and everybody's not knowing what happens and how it works, and you know the feelings and emotions, or the actual science of how it works. They don't understand any of it, and as a result, the average person, when they pass, is very, very rudimentary, if any, understanding of the spirit world. So in the case of your own ancestors, the majority of them have passed with zero knowledge. Zero knowledge of how the spirit world works. So the only way they've learned how it works is through personal experience since then. Yeah. Start at the back, please.
Okay, right up the back here. Is it right at the back, you say?
Yes.
Yeah. And then, do you want to come to Theo last?
So where are we?
Theo here.
I'm almost busting go to we. How are you? Yeah, this might have to be the last one before a we. What's the time? 24.
You covered a lot of ground with them. in the time that you spent. So my question was, obviously, the desire factor is very important, whether you're a spirit or a human being. The duration you're in the spirit world is also one factor with respect to coming to terms with what is going on.
Yes.
But the effect of spirit influence that we're under on earth, it seems like we have to have a much higher level of desire than you would in the spirit world to make progress, or is that?
I don't know if I'd agree with that. When Mary and I are helping spirits, most of the spirits have already gone through a lot of things that the average person on earth doesn't even want to face at all, emotionally or even intellectually face. And if you think about Coral, she's had to face that she's in a lot of pain and suffering, and a lot of it's physical. She had to start facing. She's already started to face before she came to us that maybe her pain and suffering is linked to things she did. See, a lot of people don't even know that when they're on earth. They think pain and suffering is some magical thing that happens to you because of nature. You think about most people who you treat, most of them would come to you going, you know, this is just a naturally occurring problem, or a genetically occurring problem, or a physically occurring problem, and they don't see any relationship between the things they choose to do and the beliefs they have to their problem, right? And so the average person who passes feels exactly the same way. They've got no idea about any of these relationships. And so when they do pass, it takes many years sometimes for them to get to the stage where they're even open to the concept that there are moral decisions that occurred on earth that are now having a spiritual and physical effect on their life. And so for the majority of them, they are basically fundamentally completely clueless about why they are where they are, why they are in the pain they have, and why there is this pain and suffering going on. And they don't, for the most part, link it to the choices and decisions, the unloving choices and decisions of their life. And it takes them many, many years, sometimes centuries, to get even to the point where you can even talk to them about it. Now, in this case, this group, I think Cora was one of the youngest persons in the group, actually. Some of them were more than 300 or 400 years old, but she was one of the youngest in the group, and she'd been in the spirit world for 60 years in that pain. So, and she's been extra sensitive to that pain for lots of child earth-based reasons, actually. Some of the others were so desensitized, particularly some of the men, that they didn't even think they were in pain yet, let alone know what the pain was. But they'd all joined together for similar belief systems. They had similar scientific interests, similar goals in life on earth. They were all very much involved in the education and scientific community as either doctors, scientists, or educators, like, so professors. And they were all gathered together because of these common goals and interests. And many of them hadn't even talked to each other about the pain they were in. Just like you wouldn't talk to some of your friends on earth about your pain you're in, right? And so many of them don't even do that. And it's only by joining together things over many, many years that people start to come to an awareness. Once the awareness begins, now some assistance can be given. And so what you're seeing when Mary and I channel is often a large degree, like a large amount of time has passed, and there has to have been a large amount of realizations they've had to come to internally before they're even ready to have a conversation. Right? So don't think that it's all happened some magical experience, because for them, they don't feel it like that. It's been, for the most of them, a very traumatic experience, right, to get to that point. And when, of course, they were like yesterday, remember, I think it was at Havana yesterday, you remember yesterday she was in the force sphere, and you can imagine she spent many thousands of years going through that process. So you imagine her like almost like clutching on for grim death, really, to the way in which she progressed, and which was all about giving up her false beliefs. But she didn't see it like that. She just saw it as giving up all beliefs, right? And so she didn't even know that the reason why she got the force sphere was that she gave up all, in the process of giving up all of her beliefs, she also gave up a whole heap of false ones. And that's why she progressed. She didn't even know that, right? And so a lot of these things you won't know unless somebody educates you. And you must be open to that education in order for you to follow that advice. And as you know, many of you here on earth, we've been doing this sharing for 15 years or more. Many of you are still not open to our advice after 15 years. So it's going to be the same in the spirit world. There are many times you won't be open to the advice that people who know what's going on try to give you, and you think, no, that's not right, that's not right, no, I don't agree with that, no, that doesn't make any sense to me. And you'll just make presumptions based on that and decisions based on that. And time will go past until you've had the realizations, till the realizations are personal to you. Then that's when desire builds, and that's when people can come and help, and that's when you'll be open to their assistance.
Yes, so I wondered if, Paget's band of celestial friends were helping bring spirits to him and trying to keep away spirits who would take away from his...
All the time.
So similarly with you, I assume there are spirits who are bringing these people to you.
Yes.
And they are being, I guess, held there so they can actually listen a little bit more than they would if they came on their own without any guidance
from anyone. Yes, there are some spirits Mary and I feel come along who haven't been brought to us, but they're already in a state where they're interested. This is fascinating. They're curious. So sometimes, like in I think it was Austria. In Austria, the situation was quite spiritually dark, but where we met was very, very bright. There was all these celestial spirits, plus Mary and myself there, and it was very, very bright. So all the spirits who would normally be in Austria all just came for a look. They were curious as to what's going on there, like in the middle of, where were we? I can't remember now. Innsbruck. In the middle of Innsbruck. Normally it's just like all about holidays and snow skiing and Alps and dangerous sports and everything else you can think of, and not about anything spiritual. So normally the condition of the day is quite dark, and then all of a sudden it's all bright for a week. What's going on? The average spirit wants to come along and find out. Now, many of them just come along for a look and go, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me, and they go. And then others go, what's going on? That I want to know more, and so they stick around and listen. And so quite often you have quite a number of millions of spirits just come and just have a listen for a while, see whether it interests them or not, And then when I start talking about God, the average spirit goes, oh, I don't want to hear about that, so I go off. And, so different ones go and leave under certain circumstances as well. And so quite often there's a lot of traffic around the event.
Lastly, what I was struck by is how much internal resistance we have. For instance, just to feel God, to ask to feel God, and like you told her to. And I'm thinking how difficult it is for us on earth to do this, when clearly...
It's difficult for anybody anywhere who has those blocks, whether they're on earth or in the spirit world.
It was exceptionally hard for her.
Very difficult.
Very hard.
And my persistence, as well as my feelings for her, as well as my feeling that she would benefit from it, which helped her, caused her to sort of try it. But it was touch and go whether she was going to try it. And it was touch and go, in fact, whether the entire group was going to try it for a while there. And You know, so, you know, it was like, for me, it's like, what can I do to convince them to try it? You know? And so there's certain feelings that I have for them which can help. And then there's also certain things I can say which can help them try it. And so one of the things, remember I said to him, let's look at why you feel against the idea of giving it a go, you know. And she brought up some of the reasons why, and in the discussion helped alleviate some of the reasons for the entire group as to why they were unwilling to give it a go. Now this is something on earth you can do when you know what you're doing, but in the spirit world, a lot of times the spirit would come and try to talk about it, and because the spirits are not brought back to earth and brought to some extent back to their memories, a lot of the spirits will just ignore it as a spirit. So oftentimes we found it much harder as spirits to help other spirits in hell than we've found it here on earth to help them.
Yes, so a prayer, the divine truth prayer, asking for love, asking for God's love, alone cannot be read, of course, from the head, but I just find, you know, if there are one or two pointers you could give, not that we haven't said it a million times already, but
well, perhaps that's a discussion we need to have when we talk about the soul tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because it's really important to understand how the soul works and how even God's love can even enter the soul, right? And also convince you to a degree about the benefits of doing such a thing. Yeah. You want to say?
I wanted to say, you know, in your question, which is you're expressing a sentiment that many people have, which is it's so hard to progress, and the more information we give about how progression works, a lot of people will think, oh, I wish I didn't know that, now it seems harder, you know, instead of going, oh wow, now I have more information, I can make better choices. And I think that a lot of us on earth, especially in the West, we're very used to having quick fixes.
Yeah.
You know, and by fix I mean in the drug sense, really, but you know, also in the physical sense, like fix it quickly. You know,
I'm hungry. Let's get fed right now.
Yes, exactly. I can't even tolerate hunger for 5 minutes. You know, it's got to be alleviated right away. And this is a part of what God is trying to help to teach us about our capacities. You know, it's like we want our souls to stay this big, and any bit of challenge we go, oh, I'll stay really small, instead of understanding that we can grow. You know, with growing is stretching and doing new things and taking on new challenges, and also engaging prayer as not a, like, oh, I prayed and nothing happened. Oh, I'll just not pray anymore. You know, like I was saying to someone yesterday afternoon, there's an education process going on. God is educating us through and you guys are leaps ahead of so many people because you have at least the intellectual awareness to begin to start experimenting with prayer, with emotion, with all these things, and getting data back. See, most people think, I cried for an hour, nothing changed, therefore it doesn't work, or I prayed twice on Sunday and nothing happened, so it didn't work, instead of going, oh, well, there's more data. Now I can learn stay in a process. You know, no one wants to stay in a long-term process of their education, and yet that's what's required. And God is like, yeah, you're up for it. You know, this is you have capacities beyond what you think you have. And
can I interrupt? I've got to do a read.
Okay.
I'm busting.
Yeah.
No,
Let's finish.
Busting.
No, let's finish.
Well, you can keep saying what you need to say. I just need to go.
I think it's time now, anyway.
No, keep talking.
Oh, well, it's pretty much
5 minutes at least.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mary, because that's exactly what came up for me too, that we're so short-sighted in our desire for immediate answers. We are closing doors before they are even open.
Yeah, we're not even knocking half the time. We're doing a little rat-a-tat-tat, and then, oh, nothing happened, therefore it's all God's fault, or it's all, this divine truth thing mustn't work. And yet from my own lived experience, actually, I'm speaking now in this life, it has required of me quite a lot. And humility is something that develops over many years. And you come to understand that your first concept of humility, which was just like crying when I need to cry, is just a tiny part of what a humble attitude, living in the principle of humility, is day to day. And the more you start to bring these qualities into your soul, it's a little bit different for me because it's more like reconnecting to our soul. But for you guys, it's imbibing emotionally these spiritual principles. The more you will understand this greater capacity you have, this ability to persist, and the rewards of persistence, and the rewards of using your will in a loving way. But most people in the West are very, let's face it, lazy. And whenever something hard comes up, we're very used to being able to blame someone else. All these things we started to talk about today, justify, minimize. It doesn't work, and I should be entitled to my sin. And actually, that's where we are preventing our growth. And also, it's like we have potential that we are denying, And this is, I feel very strongly from God, what God wants each of us to understand, that we have this potential far beyond what our shrunken soul and our sin is telling us. But when you're first kind of cracking out of those beliefs, it's like the sin creates this very hard person that you've become, this hard shell. When you're breaking out of that, it's painful, it's uncomfortable. But if you can learn to sort of embrace that process, there's rewards quicker than you think, and then they're compounding as the years go by. Cool. Steve, is it about what we were just talking about?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that building a relationship with God and growth and all what the teachings you're speaking about are kind of like building any skill on earth. Say, like you want to learn how to play the guitar. Like, you suck at it, obviously, in the beginning, and it's incredibly frustrating and ridiculous.
Yes. This is exactly the analogy I nearly gave you yesterday, which is like when you pick up a musical instrument, you don't just suddenly go,
well, I play a musical instrument, so maybe that's why you would.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But, you don't just start to learn any other skill and immediately expect yourself to be wonderful at it. Except sometimes the way children are being raised now, that there is a problem with that. Because a lot of kids do now feel that, because they're so used to being rewarded for such a minimal effort. This is a way we're destroying people's sense of themselves, actually, the little people that we're raising. So some people just become so frustrated when they pick something up and they can't do it immediately because they're used to, getting praise, getting reward with little effort. So the more you can even have this dialogue with yourself, like, oh, this is going to take some effort, this is going to feel uncomfortable. But if you relate it to any other physical thing that you've come to achieve in your life, it's taken effort. Those of you who have businesses, degrees, anything you've had to learn has taken time, and you have to build upon the previous knowledge or the previous experience to learn the guitar. You first picked it up, you had to learn how to strum, then you had to learn how to play chords, then you had to put chords together into a song, and then before you knew it, you could play that song without really thinking about it, but then you could start to learn a different song. It's very similar in your soul, even in I was talking about the quality of humility, as you start to imbibe it, you start to learn it's far more than the first thing you thought it was. It's a whole way of life, actually. I really hope we can have a discussion one day about just what humility is and what it isn't, and how it's reflected, because there's a lot of misconceptions about it.
Yeah, a lot of times you're learning about qualities for one particular quality, like what love is for the rest of your life. You didn't realise this was a part of love, and you didn't realise that was a part of love, and you didn't realise what it meant to be humble, and this is a part of humility, and that's a part of humility. And, a lot of words that are used on earth, which are given like a 3 or 4 line dictionary meaning, actually have huge meanings in when you come to terms with the real meaning from God's perspective.
And you don't get to appreciate the full depth of the thing if you just give up quickly, or if you just sit stagnant on it, or if you just accept your family's definition of love. So, persistence is a very good quality to develop. part of humility, actually. A humble person doesn't give up at the first mistake or the first failure. That's a quality of humility, or that's an effect of humility, if you like. You're willing to have your feelings and keep going, keep trying, keep doing something new, keep learning.
A humble person doesn't even feel bad about a mistake.
All right, you guys, let's wrap up for today.
It's only done that just for the end.
Yeah, you did. Unless you want to take another question.
Trust me.
Yeah. I think tomorrow we'll talk about the human soul.
Yeah.
We might do some channeling again. I notice you guys get very uncomfortable when the conversation is away from yourself and your own personal emotions. So that's something to reflect on this evening. You know, and there's a hesitancy or a resistance to applying somebody else's example or applying principles to your own self.
Yeah.
And this is going to be required if you're going to develop a relationship with God. You need to grow the capacity to self-reflect and also to apply principles that you see demonstrated in one area of your life to another area of your life. And it's a good way to practice. When you hear other people's stories and you hear principles applied to them, how does that apply to me? You know, how am I similar? What is the same?
Yeah. Very true.
You haven't taken anything away yet,
Microphone.
Yeah, you can give the mic too. Yeah. I know.
Good.
We did though. Yeah. Say it again.
Now you can say it again, Kathy.
Sorry. I said, but you haven't taken anything away from us yet.
That's right, yeah.
The only thing we took away today was attention on your
personal stories.
Big,
Yeah, and to be honest, for many of you, taking that away is the worst thing you could take away. Like for many of you, get so addicted to your story, and not only addicted to it, but also you treat your story like this is you. This is your experience. But to be honest, it's only your painful experience. And it's not you. It's just a painful experience you had. And by the way, a lot of people in the world have had far more painful experiences than you've had. You know, and we often lose context of our life because we're so self-absorbed. And this is a big problem we notice amongst a lot of people who listen to Divine Truth. The motivation to connect to God, as people say, oftentimes is not to connect to God. It's actually to save yourself from pain. And that's a major problem, to be honest, because God's not going to save you from pain unless there's certain laws that are engaged in that process. And if you think God is going to save you from pain, and in fact that you think that a good parent would save you from pain, then you're actually out of harmony with love for yourself, actually. And so yeah, it's a big problem to be so self-focused. You've got to get to the stage where your feelings are not really important to you, in a sense. And I don't mean by that you shouldn't feel them. What I'm saying is that they are temporary experiences which you will feel differently about tomorrow. And you've got to get used to that idea, that if you fully process a feeling, tomorrow you won't have it. And you've got to learn to have some faith that you won't have it tomorrow if you go through it fully today. And the average person on earth is going, my emotional experiences makes me who I am. And so they want to hold on for dear life. They're nostalgic about their story. This is my story. You're getting to know me by me telling you my story. And that's not true at all. Your personality and nature is frequently in complete disharmony with your story. Oftentimes, the real you can frequently be in complete disharmony with the story that's happened to you. And so this is when you get so addicted to these stories that you want to tell, you're actually using them as justifications to not change and grow. And God's desire for you is to be happy, and the only way you're going to be more happy than you are today is by changing and growing, so you're different tomorrow. That's the only way it's going to happen. And most of us are like a parent with a child going, and let's say, we're looking at ourselves as the child, we're going, don't grow, don't change, we want to stay the same as we are. And imagine if you actually had a child and that child was, say, 3 years old, and many of you are emotionally, as I said earlier last week, 3 years old in terms of your emotional, your emotional growth. You imagine as a parent, you're saying to a 3-year-old child, don't grow anymore. You imagine how bad that is for the child, to have a parent saying, don't grow any more than being 3. Don't be able to handle more emotion than when you're 3. Don't be able to handle more confrontation, more and also more joy and happiness and more knowledge and everything than when you were 3. Imagine if you thought that way towards a child, that would be very abusive, wouldn't it? But often that's the way we think about ourselves. We're saying, don't grow anymore. What I got now is comfortable. What I got now is great. Don't change it. Don't change. Be adverse to change.
And a lot of times when you guys put up your hands and you want to tell your story, it's because you're saying, I want someone to give attention to this pain that I'm holding on to. And
this pain's all valid. Don't you realise it's all valid?
And you love it. Love me in this pain. And it's often because you are seeking for people to acknowledge your pain before you say you feel it. But often you're not going to feel it even when that happens.
More likely not going to.
You're just going to look for more people to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And you're also kind of saying, I'm going to hold on to this until somebody acknowledges it. And in your relationship with God, you're going to learn, no, my pain is my responsibility. Nobody else, not even God, has to acknowledge it.
And also, while I'm holding on to it, I'm damaging myself and others. I'm causing further pain to my future life, and also causing more pain to others' life as well. So
the biggest person who has to acknowledge my pain is me, but even then it's not to build a shrine to it and worship it. It's to go, my pain is there, and if I'm humble, I'm going to feel that pain and it'll be gone from me. I'm not going to be attached to it as a badge or a shrine or an important thing about me. It's just part of my experience that is painful. I acknowledge that, I'm going to feel that, and it'll be gone. A lot of you don't want it to be gone because you think you're basically using it to try and get other things. Yeah.
And justify sin.
Yeah.
With it.
Justify sin is the thing you're trying to get, isn't it?
Yeah, justify sin.
May I just say, one time, you impress me all the time, but one story where you were having dinner at a restaurant and you finished off Mary's meal and didn't realize it had hot peppers in it. Do you remember this? And
I can't remember the story, but
you
I did do
ate
that
hot peppers unknowingly with Mary's
That's
meal.
right, it's chilies,
Yeah, and you didn't even tell her. You just went through it, and I was like, I'd be like, water. Yeah, those things are very impressive. All of your.
Well, it's about honouring the fact that Mary does not have to be a part of my experience. It's if we, obviously as you get closer and closer to your soulmate, you will eventually have a cycle of emotions where the part of your experience is automatic. But I don't need to force her into being a part of my experience. So if I'm uncomfortable in any way, I don't even need to tell her that I'm uncomfortable in any way. I need to sort out my own discomfort, or I need to change something, or I need to feel something, rather than tell her. Now, Mary might notice because of my movement or whatever that I am, but it wouldn't be because I'm badgering her, projecting at her, or because I'm telling her, oh, I'm in so much pain, all that kind of stuff. And so, the more you love others, the less you want to visit upon them your pain. You want to be able to be fully responsible for your own pain and deal with it so they don't have to feel it with you. So my gift to Mary is to be able to feel my own pain so she doesn't have to bear the consequence of it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's a gift that you give others. And after, the more you learn about love, the more you learn that love is about giving gifts to others rather than getting things from others. So the average person on earth goes, Mary, you've got to share in my pain with me. You've got to go through the experience with me and then you love me. Well, no, like, if Mary wants to love me, she's allowed to love me if I want to let her, right? But I can't force her to love me because love comes from her heart, not from any demand. And also, the fact that I'm trying to force her is unloving as well. So once you start appreciating the nuances of what love really is, you would never want to visit your own pain and suffering upon another person. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the way I feel about it is my gift to Mary is to not have her experience any painful consequence because of my behaviour.
Or because of what your sin. Basically.
Or because of my sin. Yeah. That's something that I need to own, I need to be responsible for, I need to work through, I need to clear out. And if Mary ever gives me even the time of day on it, well, that's a gift. If Mary even just acknowledges that I'm going through something, well, that's a gift too. But she doesn't even have to acknowledge it, So, sometimes at home, we have, we go through different experiences, Mary and I, and sometimes, like, I'm crying for days on end. I don't even have to tell her why. She doesn't need to know. If she wants to know, I'm happy to explain it or try to explain it. Sometimes I can't explain it. Sometimes it's beyond Mary's capacity to understand why I feel the way I feel sometimes. But I don't have to explain it to her. It's not something that she has to know about me. Because it's pain, it's not a part of me, it's going to leave anyway. It's not something that's permanent about me. It can leave, So what we find is that when it comes to situations in our life, sometimes we remember them and sometimes we tell each other those situations that we remember. But as time goes on, what we find is the more connected I am to Mary emotionally, the more I can feel everything she feels anyway. So I know what she's feeling, I know when she's feeling bad, I know when she's feeling sad, I know when she's feeling angry, I know when she's upset with somebody or not upset with somebody, and she doesn't need to tell me about it. Like, if she wants to, I'm happy to listen. If I want to, there are times when I don't want to, like if I feel she's in an addiction, I don't want to. I say, babe, you're just doing this to avoid an emotion, so I don't want to hear this story. So how I say to you, I don't want to hear yours, but sometimes I don't want to hear Mary's either, right? And I don't encourage Mary to listen to mine either, for the same reason. Because if it's an addiction, why would you want to satisfy it? So yeah, there's a lot of things about love that most people on earth believe are opposite. They're opposites almost. Like the average person on earth sort of feels like if you love somebody, you always listen to them. No, you don't. If you love somebody, you listen to them when you want to and when they are not in an addiction with you. That's when you listen to them. That's God's definition of love.
A lot of people feel if you love someone, you take responsibility for their pain.
And you don't. When you love somebody, you refuse to take any responsibility for their pain. Right? However, if it's pain you've caused through your sinful action, then you're perfectly prepared to take all the responsibility for that. So there's just aspects of love that we need to learn, you see. And so when Mary said earlier about, she would like to have a thing where we define humility, where just defining humility is going to take days and days and days of time, obviously. But we need to get to a stage where we're even interested in the subject, before we can prevent, when I say the average audience is not interested in that subject, because when we say humility, the average person is going, humility, just another quality. They talk about it all the time. They sort of rave on about it a bit, what's going on there, but never get to feel about it any deeper than that. And then when it comes to applying it in personal life, the average person doesn't even know what to apply because they haven't given it any thought as to what it is. And this is the case with love, truth, humility, faith, wisdom, knowledge, power, understanding, and many other spiritual, what I'd call qualities or beliefs that we need to develop in our life, along with other nuances of love. So love itself has thousands of different parts to its qualities, literally an infinite number probably, but I've only discovered thousands. And the same applies with faith, and the same applies with humility, and the same applies to truth. And it's only as you progress in love that you start realizing them all. You'd like to ask? And Michael would like to ask.
I'm wondering, on the Divine Truth website, there's some really great write-ups about like the law of attraction, and I'm wondering about the principles if those resources are on there, like what you're saying about humility, if there's no.
No, we have done some videos, quite a lot of videos about humility, for example.
I did an interview series, have you seen that, on humility with Jesus?
No, okay.
And it's about 5 or 6 2-hour sessions, at least 4 hours.
I think it was 6 or 8, yeah.
6 or 8, but it's a lot of talking we did about humility. So
10 or 15 hours.
I think it was in like 2014 or 15.
It might have been. We were in that first at the time, I think.
No, we did it at the Wandai, Wandai town hall, a lot of them.
Yeah, so it was a whole series of them, wasn't there? Yeah. So we have talked about some qualities such as humility, faith, and things like that. Obviously not exhaustively, but we have talked about them a lot. They are on our website. The issue we have with our videos, though, is that we feel that when people watch videos, it's not very engaging emotionally. To really progress spiritually, you need to be able to settle with things. You need to be able to ponder things. And so one of the things Mary and I would like to do is write more material, like books or something about subjects, rather than do presentations, because we find in a presentation, as you know, being here, there's so much spirit influence and there's so much suppression and there's so much going on in between the people and everything, that it's very hard to engage a conversation about a deep matter without there being lots of interferences. The beauty of being able to read a clear, concise text on the matter and be able to sit down and just ponder about it and think about it for days on end is that you can settle with things more. So we sort of feel like quite attracted to the idea at some point. We don't know when it can happen yet, but because we're so busy, but at some point just writing some things that people can sort of sit with about the fundamental principles about love and what love is, and truth about faith and humility, in particular those 4 things. And if we can build sort of like a resource that explains these things in an emotional as well as a factual manner, then it can help people when they read to understand the qualities that they're trying to develop. See, when we talk about love, for example, the average person is going to think, that's my idea of love. And this is the trouble with language, is I talk about love and you are thinking your idea of what that is. See, I'm thinking God's idea of what that is, and you're thinking your history, your idea of what that is. And unless you have a relationship with God, that's what you're going to do. And it's going to be in complete disharmony with what God's view of love is. But you're going to think when I say the word love that I mean your word, the word that you picture, when the feelings you have when you feel love. So for many of you, when we talk about love, you think, somebody meeting my addictions. That's how we see it. How you see it is somebody loving me. Right? And often so it's very hard, even with language, to ensure that there's a clear, concise definition of what the quality is that you're aiming to develop. And this is something we feel we'd like to address, but it's only going to probably be able to be addressed by us writing some things, but that requires, of course, quite significant amounts of time, which we don't really have available at present. But we hope at some point we will have more time available, and things will be written. there was a goal with all the 14 when we came that certain ones of the 14 would be writing these things already, but those ones of the 14 are not yet in the state where they can, and so most of it is falling on Mary and myself in terms of sharing, and so we've got to be circumspect about the way in which we use our time as well. But in amongst all that, we're looking at like, are videos very effective? Are seminars effective? Is writing things more effective? Is having day-to-day contact with people more effective? And at times what we find is that face-to-face is very effective as long as we are very forthright and straightforward about it. It can be effective. Aside from face-to-face, to my mind, almost writing is probably the next effective because when you write, people can ponder what you've written for years even to come to understand something. Video, less effective because when people watch video, they're very selective. They sort of go, oh yeah, that doesn't apply to me. Oh yeah, that doesn't apply to me. Oh yeah, that sort of applies to me, I think. And quite often they get all that wrong as well as to what does apply and what doesn't. And so often not very effective. So we're trying to adjust what is effective and what isn't effective and so forth in the process of sharing truth with you. Yeah. Michael.
Thank you. I'd like to do better tomorrow. You've given us a lot to think about, and I can't hold it.
Yeah.
Any tips for everybody having a better experience?
Well, firstly, the desire to do better is good.
Yeah.
So this is not something that we feel from people very often, that they have a desire to grow and a desire to change, a desire to do better the next day. So I've got to acknowledge that desire is a good desire. Secondly, one of the ways in which you can engage that desire is pray before you come. Like set your day up before you come to a seminar to be open, to be honest with yourself, to be more truthful with yourself, to be more humble, to take more notice of what's going on.
To not project as soon as you get uncomfortable. You know what I mean by that? So as soon as something feels a bit uncomfortable, a lot of us just go, somebody fix this. Comes out of us. Or I'm going to sleep,
To be engaged, to be more, and also come with the idea to be more honest with everyone around you, including with yourself. So don't be afraid of just exposing facts about yourself that you feel like might be embarrassed about or other things like that, because this creates openings in a whole group. When even one person in the group does this, everybody starts connecting in different ways and go, oh yes, I feel this and I feel that, and it opens up the spirit of the group. At home it's amazing because we have a group now so used to doing that we talk about all sorts of things, from shaved vaginas to like God and the universe, and everything in between, you know what I mean? And and the reason why we do is because there's truths involved in every discussion, and the more open people are, the more they're able to assimilate the principles of truth in their day-to-day life. And so there's really at home, there's no subject that goes untouched.
I don't know if there's any that we haven't covered yet.
But what we find when we're with groups is that it's very hard to do that because there's so much angst and anxiety and worry and stress about being open with things. So if we bring up a subject that's quite confrontational or quite, unusual, the average person is going, I don't know if I want to have even here sitting in the audience, let alone involved in this discussion. And so just encourage you all to sort of set your intentions in the day, even a prayerful intention to engage more truthfully and honestly and openly and with more love, even in your interactions with each other, with more love. Be interested in each other when you come. We find a lot of you don't ask questions of others. You don't find out about their life, and there's a lot of interesting people here, and it's nice to know about them and understand them better. And so come with the intention to love. So we often find that with seminars, people come, they're coming supposedly to learn about love, but when they rock up, they're being very unloving, right? Even way before then, like with Mary, when you're doing the bookings even, people are being unloving. Supposedly come to learn about love, but being unloving to the very people who are providing the event for free, while they think they're coming to learn about love. So examine, be more open to examining these things, and set your intention. And if you do that, things really go well, seminar format, even face to face, Yeah. So that's what I encourage you to do.
Good question.
Yeah. So that's a good place to leave it, I think. Yeah? Just if you can do that for us tomorrow, when we start discussing the human soul, it's going to be interesting, right? There'll be a lot of things that we'll be able to present then under those circumstances.
Yeah, have fun.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your time today, guys.